They told us the planet had maybe 6 more weeks before the crust gave out entirely, and that the last convoy would lift at dawn, whether everyone made the manifest or not. I believed them. I'd spent 11 years fixing coolant pumps in the lower bays, and you learn to trust a deadline when the ground itself is the thing breaking. What I didn't expect was the pack. There were 3 of them, originally, brought in as confiscated cargo off a smuggler's hold the year before the quake started. A lean, gray-skinned hunting trio with too many joints in their legs, built for chasing things across broken rock. Pen records called them stalker kin. Nobody wanted to process the paperwork to destroy them, so they sat in holding, and somebody had to feed what was in holding, and that somebody turned out to be me, because nobody else would walk into that pen without a rifle. I never brought a rifle. I brought a bucket and bad jokes nobody else found funny, and within a month, the stalker kin met me at the gate instead of the back wall. Within 2, the eldest one, I called her Latch, because she figured out how to work the pen door herself, started bringing me things. A bolt, a dead rock runner, once, memorably, somebody's boot. The pen supervisor at the time, a woman named Orsa who'd since transferred off-world on an earlier lift, used to stand at the rail and watch me sit cross-legged in the dirt with 3 apex predators, close enough to bite my hand off, and she never once told me to stop. She just wrote in her log that the stalkerkin showed improved temperament under handler Tova, and left it there, which was as close to an official acknowledgement as anyone in that bureaucracy ever gave a thing that didn't fit a category. I think she understood, the way I eventually did, that what was happening in that pen wasn't behavior modification. It was something closer to being chosen, and there's no form for that. By the time the other intakes came in, a pair of armored burrow cats nobody could get near, and later, a single, enormous, slow-blooded thing, the manifest listed only as Class 4, unidentified species, non-lethal in captivity. They all ended up in my section. Word travels in a place that small. If the new one won't eat, send it to the mechanic. If it won't calm down, send it to the mechanic. The burrow cats came in half feral, scarred along the flank from whatever had happened to the rest of their litter before the smugglers got hold of them, and for the first 2 weeks they wouldn't take food unless I left and came back to find the bowl empty. Like accepting it in front of me was a kind of surrender they weren't ready for. I didn't push. I just kept showing up. Same hour every day. Same bucket, same bad jokes. Until one morning, I turned around from the gate and both of them were sitting 4 feet behind me. Not asking for anything, just present. The way a dog sits in a doorway it's decided is now its post. The big one, Anchor, I called him, because he never moved unless something mattered. Came last and came quiet. He didn't snarl. He didn't pace the pen the way the others had. He just watched me through the bars with an attention that felt older than the rest of his behavior suggested. And on the 3rd day he laid his head down against the gate and went to sleep there. 400 kilos of unidentified species using a steel bar as a pillow, and I sat on my side of it and ate my lunch and didn't tell anyone, because I didn't know yet what I'd be asking them to believe. I didn't train them. I want that on record, because everyone after the fact wanted to call it training, like I'd built an army out of a coolant budget. I just showed up every day the world was ending a little more, and they noticed. The quake belt reached the spaceport 11 days before the launch date got moved up. That's when Director Hale, launch operations, the kind of man who'd spent 30 years rising through a system that rewarded never once being wrong out loud, came down to my section with a clipboard and a face already arranged into the apology he wasn't going to give. Non-essential biological cargo, he said, like he'd rehearsed it on the walk over. We don't have the hold mass. They stay. They're not cargo, I said. They're mine. He looked at me the way you look at a man who said something sentimental in a room built for spreadsheets. Sentiment doesn't fly a ship, Tova. I didn't argue further. There wasn't time, and arguing with Hale was like arguing with a closed valve. The pressure just builds on your side. I went back to the pens that night to say what I figured was goodbye, and Latch put her head against my chest and made a sound I'd never heard out of her in 3 years, low and almost human, and the burrow cats lined up behind her like they were waiting for orders I hadn't given. And the big slow one, I'd taken to calling him Anchor, because he never moved unless something mattered, planted himself across the pen door, and would not be moved by 2 handlers and a prod. I told them to behave. I told them I was sorry. I went home to a bunk that wasn't really mine anymore, and didn't sleep. At 0400 the alarms went off. Not the launch klaxon. The other one. The one that means the perimeter fence found something it didn't like. Scavenger crews had been hitting outlying convoys for weeks, stripping fuel cells off anything not yet airborne, and with 6 remaining ships sitting fat and slow on the field, somebody had finally decided the last convoy was worth the risk. I ran for the pens out of habit before I ran for the muster point, which is probably the only honest thing I did that whole night. The gate was already open. Not broken. Open, the way latch open things. Deliberate and clean. All 3 stalker kin were gone from the holding block, and for one bad second, I thought I'd lost them to the chaos. Then I came around the loading ramp and found them exactly where the trouble was, spread along the fuel cell rack in a loose, ugly formation, low to the ground, and in front of them, on his back in the dirt, a scavenger missing most of his nerve and none of his blood, because Latch had pinned him there with 1 foot on his chest, and hadn't broken skin. Hadn't needed to. He wasn't moving. The burrow cats had the second breach point. Anchor. Slow-blooded, 400 kilos of him. The thing Hale's own report called non-lethal in captivity, had simply walked into the gap in the fence, where a second scavenger truck was trying to push through, and stood there. The truck hit him. The truck did not move him. The truck reversed. By the time security caught up, it was already over. And what they found wasn't a massacre. Hale would later, grudgingly, admit that nothing on that field died that didn't try twice. It was 4 restrained men, a wrecked truck, and a Class 4 unidentified species standing in a hole in the fence like he'd always belonged there, looking faintly bored. Hale found me at the muster point an hour later, clipboard gone, face doing something it hadn't done in front of me before. They came back for the fence line, he said. Not for you. For the fence. They came back for what was theirs, I said. I'm just on the list. He didn't answer that. He looked past me at Anchor, who'd settled himself down in the dirt by the loading ramp, like the whole thing had cost him nothing, and at Latch, who was sitting exactly where I'd left her 3 hours before, watching the gate, waiting to see if I was going to ask her to leave again. Hold mass, I said quietly, is a number you wrote down before tonight. He rewrote it. I watched him do it, standing in the open air, with the ground still humming underneath us like something far below was clearing its throat. Quartermaster's office logged it afterward as a manifest amendment, 4 lines. No explanation required, though by the time it reached the crew deck, somebody had already started calling it the last manifest clause. Half as a joke, half because nobody wanted to be the one to write what it actually meant on a form, that the math had been wrong, and the things we'd decided didn't count had been the ones holding the line. We lifted at dawn anyway, only 6 hours late, with 3 stalkerkin curled in a cargo bay never designed for them, 2 burrow cats wedged against a bulkhead, and 400 kilos of patient, slow-blooded loyalty taking up exactly as much room as he wanted to, and not 1 gram more. I don't know what waits at the other end of this convoy. Nobody does. That's the nature of running from a dying world instead of toward a known one. But I know that when the ground gave out behind us for good, I wasn't holding a clipboard or a manifest or anybody's idea of what counted as essential cargo. I was holding a bucket, same as always, and Latch had her head against my chest again. And outside the porthole, the planet that raised all 4 of us was finally, quietly, letting go. It turns out the math works out fine. In the end, once you stop pretending some things were ever a number to begin with,